Hey guys, Chief Fruity here, and in this video I'm going to show you guys the behind the scenes of Dark Nights Part 2, Night Sky. So, in this song, it is very similar to Part 1 in a lot of ways with some of the sound design. So everything that was in Part 1 that is in here I will not go over. You can go over to Part 1 and watch how I did that by clicking the eye right up there. So yeah, just click that eye and that'll take you to Part 1. So I'm just going to, in this video, go over everything that's unique to Part 2. So let's get into this. So let's start with the drums in the intro. So as you can hear, there is delay on the drums, and that actually is delay that is on the master. The reason why I have delay on the master is basically just to make stuff sound a little bit more open, get it a little bit bigger. And I'll go into the mastering later in this video. So, with the drums here, it's solo at the kick. Solo. So for now I'm going to take off the delay. And basically all I have on here is a limiter cutting off the little bit of tips on the kick and a sidechain for the snare. So when I put the snare back in, you can see it's being compressed a little bit more where the snare hits. And the reason why is so it makes a little bit more room for the snare. Just that tiny bit. As you can see, it's very slight right there, and that's where there's just the kick and that's the snare. So it's very subtle. But yeah. I like to sidechain the snare drum to the kick to kind of make room for the kick. So yeah. So there's not too much going on in the kick. Like, I didn't even EQ it. I just was fine with how it sounded just as is. And then for the snare, this is the EQ I have for the snare. So I'm going to solo the snare and show you guys. So the reason I boosted this low point is because all snares should have a boosted low point. Now it looks like for this one, like now if I were mixing it again, I'd probably boost this low point instead of this one. But this one gives it more punch when you boost this low point. And then boosting some highs is kind of like a normal EQ for a snare from this point, but boosting the low point, if you didn't know about that, that is really good technique to getting your snares a little bit more punchy. And then I put on some reverb with higher damp, so it kind of has that resonance. And I panned it a little bit to the left, and the reason why is because to me, when I was hearing this, it sounded like it was heavier to the right, so I just panned it a little bit to the left just to make it sound center. So those are the drums there. Then there's just little fills and an addition of hi-hats in this section. So that's not too complicated, not gonna go over that. Here's a crash, sidechain to the kick. Then here is the bass line. And I don't know. Oh yeah, because in the step sequence everything's soloed. There we go. So this is the bass line. So here it's actually a layer of two basses. First it's a sub bass. That's not too complicated. And then the main bass is doing most of the heavy lifting. So the reason I layered these to begin with is because with this 4-string bass, it's a slap bass from Direct Wave. It's a slap pull number 2, and I just expanded its range just so the notes I was going to play would actually play in there. And this, I really like the tremble that this has. So if you look at it, EQ, it has stuff here in the mids and stuff in the bass and sub. But the thing is with this, let me pull up a fresh EQ. Here in the lows, when you boost this, it doesn't sound as good. Just for some reason, I didn't like the sound that gave it. So that's why I added in the sub bass to add in that the sub, but as a smoother frequency, So let's put this in an EQ, and you can see it's adding in some sub and more of a bass frequency around 100 hertz. And the bass could have boosted this section, but I didn't want this spot really boosted because this was like a frequency that was really weird. So with adding the sub around the bass, it really helped to pop it out and liven it up a lot. So that's why I layered the bass line with the sub. And here I have these, which I already showed you how these were made in part 1, but I'll just go over the pattern. So that's just an ambient track I have going. Here I have the lead. I already showed you how that was made in part 1 as well. And here. So this is the same lead, it just has a ton of tremolo on it. And I got the tremolo from the effector in the tremolo section. And the reason I have that is to kind of layer it so it sounds better when it has that. Just gives it more of a like a depth. And then I have this little ambient track. So yeah, pretty simple, but I showed you how most of those were made in part 1. Here I have a noise fall and upres. And then a whole bunch of envelopes, and I'll probably go over the envelopes all at the end, but yeah, there's a lot of them. Okay, so now into this section, kind of the rise. So I have a sub bass going through this. I'm just playing along with the chords. Then I fade in this synth. Why isn't it playing? So this synth was actually one of the synths from the demo project of FL12. There's actually 3 of them, so I took both of the, 2 of them, this one and this one. And like they're not too complicated, like they're basically just saw waves with some chorus and a volume envelope to fade it out. So I'm not gonna go into how these are made because it's like you can just kind of hear saw waves with chorus. So I have those coming in and out. And then here I have this FM synth. And this is what I used quite a bit for the drop. Okay, so this was a FM carrier by Seamless that I got from one of his tutorials. So let's go over what's going on in here. So like most FM synths, the mode X is right here so you can control it. Let's go down a couple octaves. And I'm going to link this to my modulation tab. So what's going on is all these operators are actually active. 1 through 6 are all going. And then this is the way that they are going through each other. So for example, 1 is going through operator 2, 1 is going through operator 3. And operator 2 is going through operator 4, operator 3 is going through operator 4, 4 is going through 5, and etc. And these are the outputs. So 6 is going directly to an output on the negative polarity, and 1 is going directly to an output on the positive polarity. So operator 1 is just a sine wave. In the damp for the key modulation, there's a little bit of change down here, and that's just the lower in the note you go, it would be less damp, and the higher the note, it would be more damp. For operator 2, in here, there's a little bit of OSC in here. The reason being is to get this wave a little bit more unique. But again, like I said, this was Seamless that made this. Operator 3, volume, mode X. So volume is affecting mode X2 for operator 3. Operator 4 is a tilted sine wave. Not too much going on in here, except the damp and key modulation are set to what they were for operator 1. And then 4, 5 is basically just the waves at this point. And then again, volume at mode X for operator 5, and operator 6 has a mode X attached to it. and the volume for mode X is not active. And then the filters are not being used. So it's just all these operators working together basically is what makes the FM synth. So yeah, that's what I got from Seamless. So let's go take it to track 26, and I put some effects on it. So without my effects, it sounds like this. And then I put on a limiter to start things off for a sidechain. And I put on a Vocodex. And the settings I did on the Vocodex was full band values. Well, actually no, not quite. They're almost full. Full compression, full wetness, and that's pretty much it. I kept the draft on. And I basically just want to expand it, make it sound thicker with the Vocodex. Put on another limiter for another sidechain, and another limiter for another sidechain, a wave shaper to give it some distortion, and then another limiter for sidechain. And then I put it through this EQ, taking out some lows and boosting a little bit of highs. And then I also routed it to a reverb and delay return. And then this is the mode X envelope, and this is the FM. And then let's go into this riser. So I actually really like the way I mixed this. I think the way I mixed this riser is probably my favorite way I've ever mixed a riser. So this is a rise, which is basically this exact replica of Techno 1. Different pitch though. But this one has more punch to it. So it's, as you can see, it's pretty much the same as all those other techno synths. But what I did to it on track 27 to make it unique was, again, a limiter for sidechain, a reverb, and this is really what enhances the riser. Is the reverb. Without the reverb, it sounds like this. So reverb is really what you need for the riser. And then I have a stereo enhancer to boost the volume, and a stereo shaper. And I think this is what did a lot as the stereo effect. Instead of having it up here, just giving you center, it is actually just panned all the way to the right and all the way to the left. And by playing it both as panned all the way to the right and the left at the same time, it makes it sound center, but it makes it sound more open. So all those things basically they got it sounding pretty good. Right here, these are volumes, and yeah, volumes of the techno sounds fading in. The carrier volume of the dubstep synths. The sub bass, this is the master volume, which is another mixing tip for rises, is to actually have the master volume decrease ever so slightly. And why I like that is because with the kick going really fast here and everything's really high, it tends to clip a little bit right here. So I fade out the master ever so slightly and then bring it fully back in for the drop. And that also makes the drop more intense because it gets like it feels like it gets slightly louder, but it actually just gets quieter in the rise and louder in the drop. Lead master, the kick also is fading out in lows as it rises, and the reason why is so it takes up less mass as it gets really quick, so it doesn't like sidechain everything like crazy, so it's just like then all you'd hear would be kick. So fading out the lows, it helps a lot. Bass channel volumes, this is the stereo enhancer for hi-hats, so there's different volumes for hi-hats throughout the song. So now let's get into the drop. So I already showed you this bass. The reason why the green bass doesn't come up is because it actually was a recording I put in of another bass that was from part 3 where the bass was created, and the reason why I didn't just pull it in as MIDI in here was because if I pulled it in as MIDI I couldn't get the EQ and the effects to sound correctly, which was really weird to me because they even saved like exact channel state and the exact plugin state and it still didn't sound the same. So I just made a recording of it and put it in here. So that's why it's not here. So I'll show you how I made the second bass here that would play in Dark Nights Part 3. But for now, let's go over the ambience of the drop. So I have these playing through the drop. So this is ambience. We have the bass, that's an ambience. So it's just these. So most of this I already went over in part 1, but I will show you. I don't think I did anything unique here, but let's look over the lead anyway. So this is the same lead, it's just up an octave. Yeah, so I already went over this in part 1. And then it's fading in with volume over the course of the verse. So I already went over all of that, and then it goes to a second rise, which is pretty much just like the first one, to another drop and verse and outro. So I already went over the envelopes. Yeah, that's pretty much it musically wise. Most of this I already went over in part 1, because part 1 does have like all these chords and leads and the ambient stuff. Part 2 is basically just the addition of the drop. So, and even in part 1 I had this bass going slightly. It was at the very end, but I don't think I went into it. So on the masters, I'm going to show you the mastering I did. So I took off the limiting for the master because I don't want limiting being the first thing going on. And then I have a soft compression. So you can see it's basically just compressing the kicks and snares. And that's what I want, because if it's just compressing the kicks and snares, that means the drums are louder than the music, and that's normally the mix I want, where the drums are loud. And then it also means that since the drums are being compressed, that would mean that the music is getting louder to kind of fill up this space where the drums are not playing. It would have an extreme volume reduction. So that's why I put it in this Maximus, where it is on multi-band compression, less compression on the lows and more on the highs. And then these are the shapes for each one, the low, mid, high, and then the master. And then I just do that, like they have their own, has its own ratios set up already, and I just like the default ratios just like that, like it just sounds good. This EQ, removing some lows, and the reason why is because this frequency takes up a lot of space on the master. And then I didn't feel like boosting any highs for this master would work, so I just cut out the lows. And I ran it through another Maximus, which is boosting the highs, cutting lows, and boosting mids slightly. And then this delay bank. And then I boost the volume as much as possible here. And then also, I took out a little bit of lows and boosted mids and highs here on this little EQ, just to kind of pop it out a little bit more. So that's kind of how I go about my mastering. And there's never really a complete formula that works for everything. So like for example, with this song using 2 Maximuses work, but there are some other songs where not even using 1 Maximus works, where it's just all the limiters with very soft compression. So it all depends on like the mix you have and like the stage volume, I guess you could say, of the song, with how, like, keep track of like how the signal is coming into the master. Because already, like, you can see all these sounds are, like, kick is almost getting red, and everything else is getting at least halfway. So that's why I like soft compression. But if it was coming in like really soft or really loud, if it was coming in really loud, I'd probably put a Maximus as the first thing. So yeah, it's just a little bit into my mastering. If you're interested more in how I do my mastering, just drop a comment and I'll make a whole video about it. So that's pretty much it for this week's video. I hope you guys have enjoyed the behind the scenes of Dark Nights Part 2, and I'll see you guys in next week's video. Be sure to subscribe so you can see my next uploads, and I'll see you then. Bye.